probably the computer at my house is used primarily to print boarding passes for when I travel. I can do that.
Born in Sudbury, Ontario, with a degree in philosophy from the University of Ottawa, Alex Trebek has been the host of the game show Jeopardy for the past 29 years. So iconic has he become in North American culture, he's appeared as himself on such classic TV shows as The X-Files and The Simpsons, to name just two. We caught up with the television icon in Toronto.
Alex, I wanted to ask you about your early years. You were born in Sudbury, but everything that I've ever read about you says, you know, born in Sudbury, and then there isn't much more other than, and then he came to Ottawa and went to the University of Ottawa.
Well, before I went to the University of Ottawa, I went to boarding school at the University of Ottawa Prep.
Ah.
I did grade 9 at Sudbury High, and then my parents separated and later divorced, and I really had nowhere to go. But my best friend, whose dad owned the hotel that my father worked at, had sent his son to the University of Ottawa Prep for a year, and he liked it. And I said, okay, let's go there. And away I went.
Now, I got to tell you, having been born and raised in Ottawa, I have no idea where that is.
It's right where the administration building is now.
At the University of Ottawa?
For the university.
Okay.
There were about 250 boarding students and 200 day students. Mm-hmm. There was the big yard and the small yard. The small yard was the younger kids.
Sounds like the pen.
Yeah, almost. And it was probably the best years of my life.
Really?
Yeah, even though they almost threw me out after the first year.
Why?
Because I was an unruly kid.
No respect for authority?
Well, no, not really. Keep in mind that my parents were separated, and that threw me for a loop. And the prefect of discipline, a Father Adrian Roy, was a bit of an a-hole. And he took a dislike to me, and I took an immediate dislike to him. And he was very judgmental, and so I made it my business to rile him. And I did a pretty good job. Some years later, I was visiting the university, and he was still there. And he was only in his 30s and had snow-white hair. And he noticed me visiting the campus, and he pointed to me, and he was with a group of young boys and girls, and he said, "See that guy over there?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's the reason I have white hair. I love that.
So you were what age at that point when you were in that environment?
I don't know, grade 10. How old are you in grade 10?
I don't know.
15?
15, 16, somewhere in there?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. But you didn't get kicked out, and you must have done okay because you ended up going to the university.
Yeah, well, I didn't get kicked out because my father and I went to the principal's office in the summer and on bended knee almost begged to be allowed to come back in. They were going to throw me out at Easter. And they said, the principal said, well, it's so close to the end of the year, we'll let you finish your year, but you can't come back. But in the summer we went, we begged, and they took me back on probation. And the prefect of discipline in the big yard, the older boys, was a Father Rosaire Duguay. Great guy. I loved him. And got along well with him. And then in my senior year, Father Pinchot, amazing, isn't it, that I remember all these names after 50 years? Father Pinchot had a simple rule. You do well in class, you get privileges. And I was doing very well in class, and he would give me privileges. So I would say, "Father, I don't feel like going to study hall tonight. What do you want to do?" "Can I go down to Rideau Street to the movie?" "Sure. Okay, just be back by lights out." "Thank you." One of my buddies went to him and asked the same thing. "Father, can I go and go down with Alex to the movie theaters?" He said, "No." "Why not?" "Because your grades suck." So there you are.
Excellent, okay. So the transition then from that environment into the university, if your grades were good, was it just like a seamless transition? Suddenly you're going
pretty
to the
well,
university?
because keep in mind that at that time the University of Ottawa was run by the Oblates of Mary Immaculate.
Yeah.
And there were 40 priests living in that main administration building. So I slept in the same building with all these priests, and I got to know them. My spiritual advisor was Father Lorenzo Dani, who was also my banker, because I had no money. My dad had lost a restaurant, And I had to borrow money from Father Donnie, and then my dad would send me money, and I'd pay back Father Donnie.
Okay.
And some of the other priests were advisors in other ways.
Is this to suggest that you're a religious person, by the way?
No.
No? Okay.
No. But Big John, I forget his last name now. That's amazing, because he was a really good influence on me. He used to, he's the only one of the priests who did not have a single cot in his room. They had small rooms.
Right.
He had a sofa that opened into a bed. He had a big Grundig radio that could pick up Nepal. I mean, it was that powerful. And he would sit and read his missal at night, smoking a cigar and drinking cognac. And I learned some of the interesting facts of life from him.
Okay.
And
yeah, I'm afraid to ask, but
no, he was great.
Yeah.
He had come from a rich family, and had given up wealth had renounced wealth and taken a vow of poverty, but a limited vow of poverty. He still enjoyed the good life.
Yeah.
So it was fun.
All right. So you start university courses. Now, you have a degree in philosophy, is that right?
Yeah.
Philosophy.
Yeah.
Why philosophy? I've never understood why anybody would bother getting a degree in philosophy. It just seems, you get all
silly,
you get filled with
mundane
ennui
reason.
and then it's all over.
Silly, mundane reason. I had no money to pay my tuition.
Okay.
I applied for work at different places. I helped process Canadian income tax forms, but the University of Philosophy had its classes only in the morning from 9 to noon, because the students were all future priests and they would take theology in the afternoon.
All right.
So I worked or studied from 9 to 12 and could take a job in the afternoon.
Expediency.
And so I worked at the CBC from 4 to midnight.
Yeah. So you're working at the CBC doing what at that point? How did
I
you
was
get
announcing.
You were announcing.
Yeah.
And that was
Chateau Laurier Hotel.
Right. I worked there myself doing radio at one point. But so did you just wander in as a student and go for an audition? How'd you get that job?
I applied for a job as a summer relief announcer, and they hired me. Way to go, Alex.
Yeah.
And then in February, they came to me and said, we have an opening on our permanent staff. We have 2 openings, as a matter of fact. Would you like one of them? I said, only if I can complete my school year. And that's when they assigned me to 4 to midnight and let me go to class in the morning. The other job went to Lloyd Robertson.
Is that right?
Yep.
Well, now.
There's a name that Canadians
some
might
people
recognize.
might remember, yes. So I have to ask, because at that period of time, Ottawa had what was often referred to as its own Tijuana, which was across the river in what used to be called Hull and is now called Gatineau. But as a university student, spent a lot of time over there?
No.
Really?
No. And I didn't spend a great deal of time when I was in boarding school either. On Sundays, I would go across the river because the movies were open. But I never went to Hull to drink. I wasn't into that.
Okay.
I stayed in Ottawa and drank.
Okay.
And very seldom, very seldom.
Okay.
I remember one contest I had with a buddy of mine from Sudbury named Richard Nemus, and he was really a good beer drinker, and I do not like beer that much. But he was boasting so much one day, I said, I'll take you on. So we were at the Albion House.
Yes, in Ottawa, the Albion, yes.
Not far from the university campus.
Yeah, that's right.
And we were drinking, and in those days, you'll recall, they had quart bottles and pints. Mm-hmm. And I think I got to 7 quarts and 1 pint, and he got to 8 quarts. And then we staggered home down Metcalf or whatever the street was.
I was going to say you're flirting with alcohol poisoning at some point there.
Oh, no, it wasn't that bad. But I did get hit by a car on the way home. No damage to the car. And back to the boarding house, and that was that.
All right. So the CBC thing ends up turning. It was pretty good for you. You ended up doing a couple of things. I certainly remember you doing, because at that point I was a young man. I was in my early teens, and I remember seeing you do Reach for the Top. I remember some music show that you did.
I did Music Hop.
Music
I
Hop.
left Ottawa after 2 years. They had an opening in Toronto, and Lloyd Robertson had transferred from Ottawa to Toronto the year before, and then I got the job on the English-speaking staff at CBC on Jarvis Street, and immediately began hosting Reach for the Top. And then the following year they were coming up with a new teen music show. Alan Hamill, who was doing, not Howdy Doody, but what was he doing? He was the one with, oh gosh, it was the morning kids show. He did the pilot for Music Hop, but he couldn't do the series because he was doing the other show. So they offered it to me. And there are so many people who take credit for my transfer to Toronto. The producer of Music Hop, Bing Whitaker, who was head of the not public affairs, but public broadcasting at that time, in that he was developing a coterie of announcers who could do live broadcasts covering government events and all kinds of things like that, the Remembrance Day ceremonies on Capitol Hill. And so he took credit, and also the producer of Reach for the Top. So I have many fathers.
Apparently. Tell me just on a personal level now, when you started doing that, did you find it to be something that you were really comfortable with doing? Was it a natural fit for you? Or, or early days, did you have to work at it?
I really don't remember.
No?
I think it came fairly naturally to me. I don't recall being in any difficult situations.
You don't remember being nervous in the early days or anything?
Oh, I
like that?
probably was nervous, yeah. But I'll tell you a story. I transferred to Toronto, and then for Canada's centennial, 1967, because I was the only bilingual announcer on the English-speaking staff, I was asked or assigned to host the CBC telecast of the Canada Day celebrations on Parliament Hill.
Right.
July 1st, Her Majesty the Queen in attendance, Prince Philip, members of the cabinet, dignitaries, and all that stuff. And it was a multicultural show. They had all kinds of dancers, musicians. They had Scottish pipers. They had not Native American, but Native Canadian performers, and they had gymnasts. They had a group of beautiful young girls, the Kalev Estonian gymnasts, wearing really electric blue leotards and bouncing balls and doing all kinds of routines. And at the end of the show, there was a French announcer and myself. His name was Henri Bergeron. He came out of Montreal. And at the end of the show, whenever performers perform for Her Majesty, the Queen comes up on stage and greets everyone. Henri was second and last in the line, and I was at the very end of the line. And here comes Her Majesty working her way down, and she gets to me. Hello, how are you? A good show. What's your name, and where are you from? I told her. And as I responded, I noticed she looked over her shoulder to see where Prince Philip was, because Her Majesty will not leave the stage without Prince Philip. Well, Prince Philip was, normally he's 2 paces behind, but he was about 50 feet behind. He was chatting up the Kalev Estonian gymnasts, all these gorgeous young blondes. So Her Majesty was stuck with me. So we made conversation. I mean, we got along fairly well. You know, I was in a position of familiarity commensurate with being her hairdresser. I mean, we were that close. Right. And finally, here comes Prince Philip, good show, and off they go. I went back to my hotel room at the Chateau Laurier, and I started getting phone calls. Alex, my gosh, what did you say to Her Majesty? You mesmerized her. She spent 5 seconds with everybody else, and she spent 4 or 5 minutes with you. So I didn't explain what had happened.
Well done.
Next day at Lansdowne Park, there was another big folklore show. I was hosting that sucker. And here comes Her Majesty. And I'm thinking, she's walking down the line. I'm at the end of the line because I'm the host. My chest starts to swell up a bit. I'm thinking, hey, here's my old buddy, the Queen. She gets to me. Hello, how are you? What's your name and where are you from?
Yes, there you go.
Completely forgot
There you go.
who I was.
Yeah.
A lesson in humility.
Absolutely.
A lesson in humility at an early stage of my career, which I have remembered to this day, and which has helped me immensely.
I'm sure.
Never get too big. Never start believing that you're it, because you're not.
Yeah.
And not only are you not it, but you can be replaced by another not it,
Not it. That's
person.
right. You went to the States in what, 73? Is that right?
Yep.
What was the catalyst? What made you want to do that? I mean, that's a pretty bold move, I would think.
Well, I was offered a job.
Yeah. So you had a safety net then when you went.
Yes, and not only that, I had accumulated 16 weeks of leave at the CBC, so I didn't have to resign.
Ah.
And I took a leave of absence, a holiday, with pay, and went and auditioned for a show. I did an audition in New York, and they called me up. It was on a Saturday. Alan Thicke was one of the writers and creators of this show, and they had exhausted their supply of available American hosts that they were interested in, so he recommended me, called me up, said, would you be interested? I said, yes. I think that was on a Wednesday. He flew up to Toronto on a Thursday. I went to his parents' home in Mississauga, I believe, on Friday to get the game explained to me. Flew to New York Saturday morning, rehearsed with a director named Marty Pasetta, who is probably best known as the director of Elvis Presley's big special in Hawaii.
Okay.
And we rehearsed all day, and at 6 o'clock we did a run-through with people from the street as our audience. It was at the Hilton Hotel. We had prepared extensively for a pretty involved bonus round, and the contestants bombed out immediately, so there wasn't the expensive bonus round. And I said, okay, that's it. I went to the airport and flew back to Toronto and in time for the second period of the hockey game. And it was fine. And then at midnight they called and said, we're going to do a pilot. We want you to do it. Can you come to Los Angeles in a month or whatever?
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
Now, at that point, if they're asking you to come back in a month, you pretty much you will have exhausted your 16 weeks off. I'm thinking, almost, or you were still there. So you're still getting paid by the corporation, is what you're telling me.
Absolutely, yes,
okay.
Indeed.
Not bad, I got to say.
Not bad at
I'm
all.
impressed.
And then when we were picked up after our initial 13 weeks, I resigned from the corporation.
So you were double dipping as you were setting up your new career. That's really impressive.
I don't like your terminology of double.
Sorry, you were getting
dipping.
2 salaries. The taxpayers of Canada were paying you while you were establishing a new
I had
career.
accumulated that leave
Of course,
because
it was your
as
due.
a single man, I had worked every Christmas, every New Year's,
of course.
so that all the married guys could get time off.
That's how it works.
I was the good guy.
There you go. So did you settle in L.A. then? Was that the beginning of you living there?
Yep.
Now, and looking over your work career once you did that, it for most of us it gets very confusing. Though I'm sure, well, maybe it does for you too.
No.
Because you seem to be going. You did an awful lot of different shows for different production companies. It seems.
Well, yes, but that's the nature of the beast in Los Angeles. I started with Wizard of Odds. I did that for a year. They canceled it on a Friday. They replaced it on a Monday with a show called High Rollers, which I hosted. And I did that for 2.5 years. Then it was off the air for 6 months and brought back, and I did it for another 2 years. And it was canceled and replaced by a show called Battle Stars, which I hosted. Mm-hmm. So I have the distinction, one of the distinctions, is that I'm one of the few people who replaced himself twice on the air on NBC. And my other distinction is that I believe I'm the only person who hosted 3 game shows at the same time.
Yeah, I believe you are.
Jeopardy, Concentration, and To Tell the Truth.
Yeah. Now, when they cancel a show like that, especially in those early days, how does that work? They walk in one day and say, like on a Friday, and say, sorry, that's it, we're not doing this anymore, and you're just left in the lurch until you hear something.
Yep, and I had just purchased a home, my first home, so I was scared.
Yeah, I would think.
But they said, you're coming back on Monday with a new show. Thank you. Good. I've been very lucky.
Yeah, no kidding.
Luck is a very important element in the success of many, many people, although they don't realize it.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about Jeopardy then.
All right.
It's been, how many years has it been now?
29.
29 years.
Going on to our 30th season this fall.
Wow. It is, I mean, for you, it has to be just like it's family, I would think.
Yeah, we had a wrap party a couple of months ago for our 29th season, and it occurred to me as I was looking out at all of the people who are on staff and who work on the show, in the crew, gosh, this is like a family. And
are there a lot of people connected to it that have been there for the full run, or are you pretty much it? Are you the
Johnny Gilbert, our announcer,
Right.
has been there for the full 29 years. My wardrobe man, Alan Mills, who died a couple of years ago, had been there from the beginning.
Okay.
Rocky Schmidt, sitting over here,
Right.
one of our producers, I hired in, was it year 2? Yeah, he was a contestant on the program, won a game, 2 games? 2 games. And then applied for a job in our contestant department, but I looked at his credentials and I said, I was producing, and I said, I need this guy. So to hell with the contestant department, I'm taking him. And he's been with the show ever since,
Amazing.
and he's now one of the producers.
Interesting. Tell me
And
about
he's trying to squeeze me out. Yeah. I hired him, and now it's like, well, thanks, Alex, goodbye. Matt Lauer and Anderson Cooper are in the wings.
Anderson Cooper is.
Your
No, he's
history.
got enough on his plate. That's the last thing he's doing, anything like that. But so tell me about I think people would be curious, but I certainly have been, about the nature of the setup. You tape for just 2 days a week, right? You do 5 days of shows? Over
Normally
2
we
days.
tape on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, 5 shows a day.
Right.
11-hour days. And then we do 3 weeks on, 1 week off.
Yeah.
We burn up material very quickly. But
sure.
the writers produce, on average, 1 show per day. So they're working a full year.
Yeah. I mean, that seems to me, just the nature of the stuff that has to come out of your writers, it's a prodigious amount of material there.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that over those 29 years, there may have been some repetition somewhere in there, but if there has been, nobody ever noticed
Well,
it.
there's repetition of information, but not necessarily repetition of form.
Right.
We'll take the same fact and treat it in different ways. I have often told people that if you want to look at it as a wheel with many spokes. And the information, the fact, is the hub. And there are different approaches to that. You know, the Battle of Waterloo. Who lost? Napoleon. Who won? These guys won. Wellington. The year. The location. So there are different ways of dealing with that one single fact. And the great thing about our show is that our writers are really ingenious at coming up with great ways of treating the information.
Yeah. Do you guys do whatever the equivalent of a table read would be for a show like this? Do you do something like that?
Well, we do a production meeting. I go over the 5 shows we're going to tape that day, and then I go into a production meeting, and I tell them why I don't want to read certain clues.
Okay.
Or why I don't think we should use this because we've done this before, or this is wrong, or whatever. And we go through all the material. The games are selected at random, so there is the possibility that a clue in one game would be very similar in subject to one of the other games. So we don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
You know, if for instance, there were 2 or 3 games which had clues about medicine, we wouldn't want that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we even it out.
Yeah. Now, I have to tell you that in my household, certainly, it has always been a fixture, always. And I mean always. And I've thought about this, even prior to knowing that I was going to speak to you, thought about the nature of the success of the show, and I'm sure you have as well over 29 years, but it seems to me that in the universe, the television universe extant right now, with shows that offer hundreds of thousands of dollars and all this stuff, that Jeopardy focuses on information, knowledge, with not huge amounts of cash, but the cash almost seems to be secondary to the nature of the game itself. And it's always seemed to me that that's the appeal that it has for the people that have stayed with it for so long.
Well, Jeopardy provides people with an opportunity to show off their intellectual skills, if you will. But we doubled our cash awards about, 10, 12 years ago. And so the winning average now is probably around $16,000, which is not small change.
No.
But still, the players, I think, come primarily for the glory, and the money is a little extra.
Yeah, it is. Okay, we've only got a couple of minutes left here.
We do?
Yeah, believe it or not, we've almost done half an hour.
Good for you.
It is good for you. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about. You just said you have 11-hour days, 2 days a week. You're shooting 5 days. And one of the things about this show is that you're standing the whole time.
Well, not now.
No?
Since my second heart attack and my torn Achilles tendon, they gave me a seat, and I can sit.
Because that must have been brutal, standing through all that stuff, I would think.
I didn't realize it at the time, but I've commented in recent years. People ask me, aside from Jeopardy, what was your favorite hosting job? And I say, to tell the truth. Why? Because I got to sit down. But now I do sit, and it helps.
All right. Now, I also read somewhere, and you tell me if this is true or it's a made up.
There are many false stories in land of rising sun.
Then here's one of them. You're not an internet guy.
No.
You're not a wired-in guy. You don't. No. Do you have a cell phone?
Yeah, with a rotary dial.
Get the hell out of town.
And an antenna.
Yeah. Right. But seriously, you're not an internet person at all. So you don't do any of that stuff.
Well, if I'm interested in finding out something, let's say we have a clue on Jeopardy, which arouses my curiosity about that subject, I will go on my computer,
right,
and I know how to access information. And I think probably the computer at my house is used primarily to print boarding passes for when I travel. I can do that.
And one of the other things, I'll ask you this finally then, one of the other things that you're well known for is the National Geographic, the whole event that's once a year. It's an annual.
Once a year, but no longer.
Is that right?
Well, for me. Well,
you're out of it now?
I'm out of it.
Yeah.
I've completed 25 years, and I'm being replaced by Soledad O'Brien.
Oh, okay.
And after I finish talking to you today, I leave for Washington tomorrow to receive the Alexander Graham Bell Medal, which they don't award that often. I don't know if it's a really special medal. Maybe it's because they want me to contribute to the society. But
now, don't be cynical.
It's, they've only awarded it twice before. So it's an honor, and
that's wonderful.
I'm appreciative of that.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And we've run short of time.
Okay.
Thanks a lot for doing this, Alex. I really appreciate it. It's a great pleasure.
Good.
Thank you. Thanks.
Fade to black.